A listener note: this story contains adult content and language. If you're listening to this podcast, you might want to go back and start at episode 1. This is a story being told in chronological order. Therefore, if you come in at episode 2, you might miss some details or context that are pretty important to the story. The Colombian author and Nobel laureate Gabriel Garcia Marquez wrote, "What matters in life is not what happens to you, but what you remember and how you remember it." From Exclave Media, this is The Sicario Effect.
Se busca a Pablo Escobar. Recompensa 2,700.
Con John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez. ¿Usted por qué se entrega de nuevo a la justicia?
Porque no le debo nada a la...
A Colombian hired killer known as Popeye has been released from prison.
Hola guerreras y guerreros, yo soy su amigo John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez, conocido como Popeye.
¿Cuál es Popeye, mi señor?
Yo soy John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez Popeye, la
Episode 19. Amnesia. Shortly after the trial, Popeye's defense attorney, Jorge Andrés Villegas, spoke to the media.
Eso sorprende a mi representado que una investigación en Colombia se adelante en 4 días.
I have requested the right of equality, and that the Episcopal Conference in Bogota be given as the place of confinement for my client. The same is received by Zucius Pausas Hernandez Solartea, a.k.a. Jesus Santrich. Let me try to break down what he just said. In his statement, Popeye's lawyer referred to a man named Zucius Pausas Hernandez Solartea, a.k.a. Jesus Santrich. He's a former guerrilla and commander of the FARC. Jesus Santrich played a pivotal role during the peace process. This was a big deal. However, in April of 2018, Jesus Santrich was accused of drug trafficking by a federal court in New York. This complicated a lot of things. He was arrested. Then he went on a hunger strike. Then, in May, the Colombian Episcopal Conference stepped into the picture and gave him sanctuary. They took him from jail under what they claimed as a solely humanitarian matter, and in coherence with the Church's principle of defending human life. In a rather unusual move, the Colombian government allowed it to happen and proclaimed they have directly assumed responsibility for the transfer, security, and health care of Santrich. The bottom line is that they intervened, claiming he was essential to the peace process. With the election close approaching, the last thing they wanted to happen was for the peace with the FARC to fall apart. Whether it was Popeye's idea or his attorneys, it seemed like another attempt to make a statement, similar to the kind he had made on Twitter. He then addressed his concerns over the prison where Popeye was sent. A mysterious vacancy opened up all of a sudden in Valledupar prison. In a prison known for overcrowding, this is odd. Popeye refuted the charges brought by the prosecutor's office and pleaded not guilty. While the prosecutor stated that it has evidence that Popeye runs an extortion/collection office, his lawyer vehemently denied this and said it was a misunderstanding. He sat down with a lady to let her know there was a debt problem with her son and that they would look how to solve the problem. But that was it. There was nothing beyond that. The charges. In late 2017, Colombian National Police conducted a high-priority raid to capture the alleged head of Colombia's most powerful criminal organization. The target of their operation was Juan Carlos Mesa, alias Tom, or as he is known by his other alias, Carlos Chata. Alias Tom is believed to be the de facto head of La Oficina de Envigado. La Oficina originally began as a collection office for Pablo Escobar. Today, it is a highly systemized vertical criminal organization that farms, cultivates, processes, and distributes cocaine on a grand multinational scale, while managing to launder vast sums of money throughout the international banking system. Back in December of 2017, in the small upscale town of El Pañol, Antioquia, at the resort called La Casona de la Caso, the leadership of La Oficina were celebrating the birthday of alias Tom when it was raided by police. The raid was a success. Police nabbed their target without incident. While alias Tom was taken into custody, the police discovered another guest at the party, Popeye. Despite being detained, he was eventually allowed to go home. It caused quite a stir. And while Colombians debated on the internet about his freedom, and politicians publicly denounced Popeye's presence at the party, Colombia's chief prosecutor against organized crime, Claudia Carrasquilla, wanted to act. A native of Medellin, Carrasquilla grew up during the narco wars of Pablo Escobar. Prior to her current post, she was previously the director of the Sectional Prosecutor's Office of Medellin. During her tenure, she stood out for her investigative work. Carrasquilla's relentless pursuit to eradicate criminal enterprises in Medellin, as well as Colombia, has made her a target. In 2017, a bounty was placed on her head by several criminal outfits. She is someone who has dedicated her life to fighting crime. From her secure bunker in Bogota, she crafted a plan. She set in motion 2 actions. The first action was public. She filed a request with the judge to revoke Popeye's conditional release. While the action seemed serious, it amounted to nothing more than a bureaucratic process that the general public eventually forgot about or lost interest. The threat to Popeye diminished after a few months. Now, looking back, it seems that the first action was more than just a bureaucratic process, but rather possibly a diversionary tactic to give the appearance that the prosecutor was just going through the motions, but really nothing serious to sweat about if you were Popeye. The second action was the one that mattered. Shortly after Popeye's appearance at Alias Tom's birthday party, the prosecutor set up a secret unit to investigate Popeye. The unit followed him. They watched. Carrasquilla has stated she knew Popeye would once again mobilize criminal organizations in an attempt to take control in the city of Medellin. They had discovered Popeye had met with Juan Carlos Castro, alias Pichi Belen, or Pichi, the top lieutenant of Alias Tom. By the way, I'm not making up these nicknames. The purpose of the meeting was to set up a collection office for mafia debts of old narcos who had been extradited to the U.S. and now returned to Colombia after serving their time abroad. The idea was that they would try to recover money or properties left in the hands of former figureheads or third parties in good faith to act as a sort of cover to make them appear legal, since it was narco money or properties purchased with narco money. Now here's where it gets odd. According to the charges, in addition to the activities of La Oficina, Popeye was also going after some old debts and properties that he believed belonged to him. This is where the extortion comes in. This is what Popeye is charged with. This is why the prosecutor issued a warrant for his arrest. In Popeye's charges, it revealed something. In October of 2017, a woman whose identity is currently protected stepped forward and went to the prosecutor's office with claims that Popeye had been extorting money from her family. According to the charges, the man who was the former chief of sicarios for the Medellin cartel first approached the woman's son. Despite calling several times, the man didn't answer his cell phone. Popeye then located the man's mother, a lady in her 60s. She was summoned to a restaurant in Medellin for a meeting with Popeye. At the meeting, the message was clear. They had to transfer their property into the name of John Jairo Velasquez Vasquez or deal with the consequences. Let me try and explain this in a little bit simpler terms. Let's say that a narco who had made a lot of money came to you and said, I'm going to buy this building and I'm going to put it in your name. Okay? So you have this building in your name. And then that narco goes to jail. He's in jail for a long time. And eventually you decide, well, I don't want to hold on to this anymore. So I sell the property. Now, the person who buys the property has nothing to do with the narcos, right? Wrong. This is what Popeye was doing. He was going after the people that were in control of those properties. According to General Oscar Gomez, commander of the Metropolitan Police of Medellin, in the middle of his logic, Popeye feels that these belong to him. It seems odd, right? If I understand this correctly, Popeye felt entitled in some way because of the provenance of these properties or money. So he was approaching people and shaking them down. That's according to the prosecutor. That's a far cry from trying to forget the past and move forward in his life, as he claimed during our interview. Based on the complaint, Claudia Carrasquilla had established an elite body dedicated only to the case. In that group, there were personnel from the Office of the Prosecutor, the DJIN, and the intelligence of the Metropolitan Police of Medellin. The authorities claim that they have enough technical evidence to support the case, including video of the meeting between Popeye and the lady. Shortly after his arrest, there were several news reports that claimed Popeye was facing possible extradition to the United States. I had my doubts about this, so I set out to see what I could find out. I decided to start with ICE. That's Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement. After going through their various media channels, ICE was pretty much a dead end. Nobody wanted to comment on it, let alone speak on the record. After getting nowhere with ICE, I moved on to the DEA. Now, I did speak with someone from the DEA, but their position was, basically, they won't comment on any ongoing investigation. I get that. However, in my conversation with the DEA spokesperson, they did mention something that made me think Popeye's chances of extradition were slim. Before anyone can be extradited, they need to be charged with a crime in the U.S. They recommended that I reach out to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Why there? 2 reasons. First, it's the preeminent court in the United States. Almost all of the major cases against the cartels are tried by the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Southern District of New York. Joaquin Guzman Loera, a.k.a. El Chapo, is currently on trial in New York. All the charges against him were filed by the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. Unfortunately, the U.S. Attorney's Office doesn't comment on any ongoing investigations. But here's the thing. Unless there is something that we don't see or are going to be completely blindsided by in the future, which I suppose, while unlikely, is a possibility. Currently, I don't think Popeye's alleged crimes of extortion or even threatening a political candidate merit a charge in the U.S. Thus, extradition seems a long shot. I won't say never, but at the moment, it doesn't appear likely to happen. Another thing, it's still unclear what role ICE or the DEA played in the apprehension of Popeye. The only thing I seem to surmise is that the alleged victims of Popeye's alleged extortion have sought witness protection in the United States. Thus, that would make it true the U.S. aided in the arrest of Popeye. At the press conference, the mayor and prosecutor did say they were aided by ICE. But without much more than that, it leaves things up to the imagination. It also makes for a lot more menacing headline. So yeah, technically, they were aided by ICE. But that might just be taking a witness in. It doesn't mean they were there, in the investigation, line by line, going through it, hunting down Popeye. I find that a little hard to believe. So, even if Popeye isn't going to be extradited, yeah, that might deflate some of the headlines around him. It still doesn't minimize his arrest. That was still a big deal. So that was it. After Popeye's arrest, we didn't hear much from him. His Twitter feed had pretty much stopped. There was, however, a few tweets that came out while he was in jail. The first was on June 17th. I am very happy democracy was imposed in Colombia. It was worth the fight. Thanks to everyone. I love you very much. Hashtag Duque President. Then, on June 23rd, a handwritten note from Popeye was posted on his Twitter account. Guerreros y guerreros, accept my gratitude for not leaving me alone. I am calm and firm. By the hand of the good Lord, justice will be done in my case. I'm exercising, reading, and writing. I've changed my life. Being sent to prison because of what I did doesn't worry me. It would be complicated if I were in prison for murder or another serious crime. And I'm glad to know that you continue supporting me. Oof! I am in very good health and spirits. And above all, very positive and happy. It has never been easy for me, but this time, I do not fight alone. Here I feel the energy of you. Each day God sends me angels. Soon a door will be open for my problem. I can feel it. Sending you a big hug from my dungeon in Valledupar prison. John Jairo Velázquez Vázquez, alias Popeye. Then, on July 13th, 2018, his last tweet. At no time have I declared a hunger strike. The jail is for men, and as such I am paying, even if it is an injustice. I ask the media not to spread false news about me. So that's it. That's where Popeye's at right now. It seems that our time with Popeye is coming to an end. What the future holds, I don't know. We'll see. Perhaps his lawyer will do something and he'll be out shortly. Or it'll be a long process. I do think that he's going to be there for some time. And if he gets convicted on these crimes, well, potentially he's looking at a long prison sentence. I'm not going to speculate. One thing is clear. He's not pushing the narrative. Oh, I suppose that there's people out there that are still pushing it, but Popeye's voice for the moment is quieted. Only time will tell if it will stay that way. I do think that there are others, though, that will continue to push his narrative. For his victims, for the ones that are the most forgotten in all of this saga, I suppose it's a respite. It's a brief but tranquil moment to have someone like Popeye return to prison. Do you remember back in the last episode when I mentioned that what's on the surface will surprise you because underneath is something very different? I wanted to mention a story, something that happened a long time ago, actually, when I first started researching this podcast. In the beginning, there were people I came across from different articles, news reports, etc. And my brain, at least, would categorize them. Some as good, some as bad. For instance, narco guy bad, police colonel good. But what you come to learn in Colombia is that's not always the case. So you might recall, way back in one of the early episodes, we talked about Pablo Escobar and how he attacked the DOS building, which is the Colombian FBI. He did it for one reason. He wanted to kill someone. General Miguel Alfredo Maza Marquez. That was the target of the whole thing. Fortunately, for General Maza, he survived. Now, that's all I mentioned of it. Then I went on to talk about the destruction, etc. And as I was researching things, again, that was one of those things that stuck in my head. Miguel Maza Marquez, good guy. Well, as I said, things in Colombia aren't what they seem. During the course of the research, I came across something. And it was a story about General Miguel Maza Marquez. Only it wasn't from 1989 or 1990. No, it was from 2016, where the Colombian Supreme Court sentenced him to 30 years in prison for his participation in the assassination of Luis Carlos Galán in August of 1989. I was floored. That was probably for me the first experience in this entire process where I started to realize that what is on the surface is very different. What seems to be discernible and identifiable isn't. And I bring his story up because when it comes to trying to understand Popeye, just when you think you have a handle on it, you don't. Just when you think, hey, guy got out of jail after 23 years and 3 months, how hard is it to stay on the straight and narrow? And then boom. Whether he did it or not, he's back in jail. Yes, it's possible that he's a victim himself of a wrongful prosecution. That possibility is always there. But if you look at history, it's hard to believe that. It's hard to believe that he didn't do something wrong. Time will tell. I want to shift for a second. I want to talk about somebody I've never met. In Medellin, there's a woman named Rosalba Alves. Her backstory isn't that unusual. As a teenager in the 1980s, she dreamed of attending university. But unfortunately, as is quite common in Colombia, her father didn't have enough money. So instead, Rosalba chose to join the police force, an admirable profession. To be a police officer at that time was something remarkably brave. She enjoyed it. She excelled at it. Soon she began to have another dream, that of becoming a senior police sergeant. And despite the increasing violence in her city, she fought zealously to uphold the law in Medellin. And while Rosalba was trying to keep the city safe, Popeye was carrying out various acts of terrorism as directed by Pablo Escobar. Many of those included kidnapping. Eventually, their paths would intersect. In 1990, Rosalba was taking part in a hostage rescue. During the operation, a young cartel member detonated a grenade near her. It was a specific type of model, referred to as a fragmentation grenade. To make the device more lethal, a preformed fragmentation matrix consisting of spherical or cubed notched wire is placed inside the grenade during its manufacture. It's designed to cause maximum damage. Because of her proximity, Rosalba was badly injured. Her most serious injury was to her right arm. Doctors were left with no choice. They had to amputate her arm from the elbow down. At that moment, any dreams of becoming a senior police sergeant were extinguished. Her police career was finished. After the incident, things got even harder for her. According to Rosalba, disability benefits are only given to victims of crimes against humanity. Despite the grenade used to disfigure her arm, the government told her that it was just a regular crime, and therefore she didn't qualify. She since had to learn how to do everything with her left arm. Despite this life-changing event, she managed to go back to school and became a psychologist and even earned a master's degree in human rights. In 2017, she actually sat down with Popeye. They both had agreed to participate in a Russian television program. During their encounter, Popeye apologized to her on behalf of the cartel. Now, on balance, he seemed sincere, and she seemed to appreciate his sentiment. It'd be hard to comprehend that he didn't feel bad for her. I don't doubt that. That's easy. But it's the contradiction. The constant praise of Pablo Escobar. The bravado of his narrative on social media. It all seems to somehow undermine the encounter. At one point, the film shows her in the kitchen. I can't seem to get this image out of my head. She was trying to cook for herself, using only one arm. Popeye's entire narrative is built on the lives of so many innocent victims. 100 Years of Solitude is a book by the Colombian writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's his most famous work. Next to Cervantes' Don Quixote, 100 Years of Solitude is one of the most famous Spanish-language novels of all time. I first read it in high school. When I started working on this podcast, I read it again. Reading it this time, I discovered certain themes that took on greater meaning for me. In the novel, there's an imaginary village called Macondo. Its residents all suffer from a horrible illness. Its symptoms are insomnia, followed by such acute memory loss that all objects have to be labeled with their names and functions, until eventually words themselves cease to have any meaning. It's hard not to interpret this as some kind of commentary on Colombia's ability to forget its past. My friend and co-producer Esteban had his own term for it, the Colombian superpowers. As he sits in prison awaiting trial, and our story comes to a close, you can make up your mind about Popeye however you like. In the course of this, I discovered that Popeye's story is just a small part of a much bigger, more important story. From my interviews to following the story over the past year, what emerged was a fight for the narrative, both past, present, and future. Through the use of social media, these narratives are all amplified. One thing is for certain. There is a unique challenge ahead for 46 million Colombians. And if I've learned one thing, it is this. There is a danger of not only forgetting the past, but also telling the past correctly and accurately, and to make sure it's talked about in a context that matters. Welcome to the front line of the future. I want to take a moment to thank all our listeners. I know there are a lot of podcasts out there, and the fact that you chose ours, it means a lot. As I previously mentioned, The Sicario Effect started out as something really different. And the fact that you stuck with us, it means more than you'll ever know. So thank you. This particular episode was sound designed and mixed by Ernie Hurtado, who without his help and guidance, none of this would have happened. Along the way, my friend and colleague Esteban Orozco lent his invaluable talents every step of the way. He is a true guerrero. In addition, his brother Juan Felipe Orozco was incredibly helpful with so many different things, from the artwork to translations. The two of them will always be Los Hermanos Orozco. Que berraquera. One thing I would encourage everyone to do: check out two things. The first is the Museum of Memories in Medellin. Now, they have a website. It's in Spanish and it's long, but I'm going to try and give it to you. museocasadelamemoria.gov.co. That's museocasadelamemoria.gov.co. And second, the Narco Tour Project. That's narcotour.co. narcotour.co. Both are committed to telling the stories of the victims. I think it's important. These are the stories that you won't hear about on Narcos. Some of you have written me and asked about Season 2. Well, all I can say is, we'll see. But there are a lot of other stories in the world of narco culture that we're planning to tell. Stay tuned. There's more. Please visit our website for a full list of credits and some cool bonus materials, like photos, videos, and declassified documents at thesicarioeffect.com. If you're not sure how to spell it, it's the name of the podcast. Or you can follow us on Instagram at The Sicario Effect, or on Twitter at Sicario Effect. There is no the in the handle. And on Facebook at Exclave Media. I'm Jonathan Branstein, your host and writer. The show is produced by me, Caitlin Tyrrell, Ernie Hurtado, and Matt Olson. Our editor is William Broughton. Our engineer, sound design, and mix, Ernie Hurtado. Co-producer, Esteban Orozco. Music composed by Preston Nowakowski. Artwork, Juan Felipe Orozco. Additional music is composed by William Broughton. Interview translator, Alejandro Caseño. Additional translation, Juliet Restrepo, Christina Madrid. Production support was provided by Daniel Urria. Special thanks to Laura Kate Jones, Mauricio Builes, Alejandro Brugas, Alejandro Doring, Alexandra Doring, Tim Fufus, Tom Freston, Ross Bernard, Kelvin Wells II, Saad Mohseni, Yoshi Obayashi, Jeff Frankel, Stephen Molina, and the fabulous Los Hermanos Orozco. Additional thanks to the Museo Casa de la Memoria in Medellin, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, the George Bush Presidential Library and Museum, Michael Pinckney, Mary Finch, Iafit Medellin, Luisa Garces. Also, please visit the Narco Tour Project at narcotour.co. That's narcotour.co. This podcast is dedicated to the memory of Guillermo Cano, Anthony Bourdain, and Larry Bresner.